Floyd here again. We're in Revelation, the book of Revelation. We finished chapters 1 to 3. We're not in 4 yet because we covered Isaiah 24, which has a little bit to speak about the end times. And now we're covering Matthew 24 in hopefully 3 videos. This should be the 3rd one, which also give us some very important information about what's coming down the pipe, connecting it with what Revelation has to say. We're in verse 29, but let's look at verse 27. Verse 27 tells us how we can know when Jesus comes back that it's really Jesus and not an imposter like he talked about previously. And that is, he's going to make it so clear that everybody's going to know it like lightning in the sky. Nobody's going to miss it. How he's going to do that, he doesn't say. But basically, nobody's going to miss and go look at him and go, we need to theologically discuss if this is the Messiah. Nope. Everybody's going to know it's him. That's verse 27. Verse 29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of the sky to the other. This coming great tribulation is worldwide. You can't escape and run away from it if you're on the earth at that point in time, but it will have an end. And when it ends, all the lights will go out. The sun will stop shining, the moon will stop reflecting its light, and the stars, it says they will fall from the sky. That is almost impossible to understand literally because falling requires a reference point. You have to have some place to fall down to. And if the earth is the center of the universe, i.e. everything will fall toward it, well, one star could obliterate the earth because it's 1 billion times larger than the earth or even our sun. So a literal falling is probably not meant, as again, everything collapses in on of itself. Problem with that view, of course, it would wipe out humanity, and Jesus has had some very strong things to say about eternal life of humans later on. Well, if the light turns out, then the earth and the heavens only have darkness. And so we're interested in the sun and the moon, but we know from other passages there are other powers out there, demonic powers, angelic powers, etc., and their light will be turned off. The interesting thing about the sun and the moon and the stars all stopping their light and putting all of creation in darkness is the 4th line says, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. That's not just humans. The powers of the heavens are not on the earth. The powers of the heavens are on the earth and in the heavens. So all of the beings that God has created in the past, I would say demonic beings, because I don't think the angels are going to be shaken. They're probably going to be rejoicing, and finally we get to this point. But the demonic world, from the devil on down, will be shaken when God turns all the lights off in the heavens. We have to read further in Revelation to figure out what this shaking is going to be, what's it actually going to look like. But when we read the next verse, once the lights are turned off, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. So he will be visible because he in and of himself is light. The sun, the moon, the stars all get their light from him because he created them and he put light in them, and they shine because he allows it. Well, he's going to turn that light switch off and he's going to show up. And he is the light source of all creation. And when he shows up, i.e. in the sky, however we see that, we're looking up and realizing it's actually Jesus. Then it interestingly says, all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Okay, all the tribes of the earth basically references all of humanity. It's not just emphasizing the different cultures and the languages, it's emphasizing all of humanity on the earth will mourn. Well, what does that say about where the believers might be? Because when he comes back, the believers aren't going to mourn, they're going to rejoice. So maybe it's possible that there are no believers on the earth at the end of the tribulation when he comes back. Turns the lights off, he himself is shining, and everybody else, all the humans on the earth at that point are in a panic and they're mourning, they're upset. They've lost, they know it. And the reason for their mourning is described in the next line. They will see. You can only see if there's light available, and he being the light, they're going to see him. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Those two words combined say everybody loses who's mourning. If you don't want him to come, if you don't like him, you agree, you rejected him, etc., and he shows up visible as he is in his true identity as God, with all power, with all great glory, it's over. Anybody on the earth at that point who's mourning, it's over. They've lost and they know it. He did predict it. It's now coming true. So what's he going to do when he shows up? If they're mourning, they must be petrified about something, nervous about something. What is he going to do? Look at verse 31. He will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now, from the four winds would be all direction, north, east, south, and west. From one end of the sky to the other, we could take as a metaphor meaning everywhere, anywhere on the earth in all directions. We could understand it as these believers' souls are floating around in outer space somewhere, and he collects them now for the angels to bring them in. But if they are on the earth, the first thing he does when he shows up is he gathers those who belong to him. Those who are mourning are probably expecting judgment of an eternal nature. But at this point, he first talks about the people who are his elect. And I want a little caveat here. He elected those who chose him. He gave humans the ability to make choices. He gave fallen humanity the ability to make choices because he wants to be loved, not just obeyed. And so his elect are those who said, I'm answering the call to God. God gives that elect person to the Son, and the Son saves them. And then after gathering the elect, we enter a world that we know very little about. And that's the days before Noah, or the days of Noah. Let's read the verses. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. Fascinating how God uses gardening and plants to illustrate the future. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. Right, that's true. So you too, when you see all of these things, what things? Well, the things he just talked about, recognize that he is near, right at the door. So I'm looking at all these false Christs and all this thing happening, and I'm looking at this tribulation still coming down the road. Well, if the tribulation hasn't arrived yet, then he's not here yet. He comes after the tribulation is over. But once it starts and people are in it, then they can say, oh, we're really close. Right at the door. Verse 34, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Well, this generation is very specific, and there's been some debate as to what that means. Which generation are they talking about? Are they talking about this generation of Jesus while he's there on the earth and at the time frame while he's around? Some people have postulated that. Another possibility is the generation in the future. When all of this starts, it will end before the generation is over. So however long God defines a generation, we define a generation as 100 years or 40 years or 52 and a half years. Each culture will do it differently. But God's definition of time is a generation is that group of people that existed at that time period, however long they existed. And he's saying whatever specific generation he's talking about, it will not end until all of the things he just talked about have come to a conclusion. So it seems like it's talking about the generation that exists at the time and right after the tribulation. We'll know when it happens. But the more important verse is what follows, verse 35. So let's not take verse 34 out of context and build a huge theology around it, unless, of course, you want to write a book and make lots of money by people who are stupid enough to rip verses out of context. 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Now look at 34. This generation will not pass away until. So it will pass away. It will cease to exist. After all those things have happened, it will cease to exist. Heaven and earth itself, they will pass away. So it seems like everything he's created has a time limit and will eventually cease to exist. But his word, my words, plural, my, God, words, plural. You know how much God loves languages? He created language so we could understand him, so he could communicate to us and tell us about him, and then how we could communicate with everybody else. But at the end of 35, we're still sitting here waiting on the answer to one question. Okay, but when? When is this generation going to start? When is this generation going to... When? Verse 36. But of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. Now, be careful stumbling into the heresy that Jesus is not God because he doesn't know when this is. Be careful telling God what it's like to be inside the Trinity. Okay? There is no fourth slot in the Trinity for some theologian wanting to tell God that Jesus isn't deity. Be careful with that. Just look at the text and recognize the point is we don't know what the Father knows. And how he and the Son and the Holy Spirit operate with one another, let's set our theology aside a little bit and just hang on to the text. The text is inspired, not our theology books. And I'm not anti-theology. I have a PhD in systematic theology. I loved every minute of studying it. The text is inspired, not our theology books. So if only the Father knows, and he hasn't told anybody, then we can't, in good consciousness, go around claiming we're going to bring the kingdom to the earth now. We're going to do it in our generation. That's baloney. He's going to do it when he wants to do it, and it'll happen when he wants it to happen, and he is under no obligation to tell us when it's going to be. Our job is to reach as many people for Jesus in our generation, die, and go to heaven. But he does tell us why the world won't be ready for him to show up. So only the Father knows when. But notice here, the world won't know when he's going to show up. Read the next verses. There's 37. For just as the days of Noah were, and that requires a long discussion, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. Well, now we need to study the days of Noah. What was it like during the days of Noah? Well, we have to be careful there because it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that was going on during the days of Noah will go on right before the Son of Man comes back. But there are some specific things about the days of Noah that will be exactly like just before Jesus comes back. In verse 38, for in those days before the flood, so we're not talking about in the boat, in the ark, or afterwards, they were eating and drinking. Yep, the whole world was eating and drinking, just a normal lifestyle, etc. While Noah is building this boat in the backyard, everything's normal. They probably laughed at him, thought he was an idiot, because they'd never seen a boat that big before. They'd never seen a boat before. They were also marrying and giving in marriage. Let's do a side note on that, okay? Marrying and giving in marriage is a very cultural way of saying that men marry and women are given in marriage. This is not right or wrong. This is just how culture is. That after the fall, men kind of ruled and women were kind of stuck being submitted to these imperfect rulers. And the mothers and the wives didn't give their sons away. The fathers gave their daughters away in marriage. So marrying and giving in marriage. And that followed in the Roman, all the way to the Romans. They made it very clear. No, the fathers are in charge and they give their wives, they give their daughters away to men to be married. This all normally happened. Now look at this. Eating, drinking, marriage, and giving in marriage. Those are basically fundamental to any society. You got to eat to survive. You got to drink to survive. You don't need to get drunk, but they did. And you need to marry and give in marriage because otherwise your culture, your tribe will die. It'll die out. So it's just a standard normal thing that every culture is going to get married and have kids. And in order to keep the marriage and the kids moving forward, they're going to eat and drink. Now, this is just basically a description of normal everyday life before the flood. Then he goes on to say, until that day that Noah entered the ark. So here's Noah building this ark, and everybody is, however they're responding to Noah, they're living a normal life, whatever that normal life was. And we really don't know how advanced that society was back then. There's one idea that if people lived for 800 years, can you imagine just 1% of the population in that world having the IQ of an Einstein? And if Einstein didn't live 80 years, but he lived 800 years, how much more advanced would a world civilization be? Don't die for this idea, but it might very well be that world was a lot more advanced than we could even imagine. But then, why don't we know that? Well, if God's going to flood the earth and drown everybody, he's going to drown all of those munition factories and all those farms and all of those bombs and all of those everything. And he's going to say to Noah, I only want you to take animals. Don't take any ammunition. Don't take any computers. Don't take anything that's advanced. Just animals. And when it's over, you're going to go back to being a farmer. You're going to plant grapes. And you're going to get drunk, which is stupid, but the basic is you're going back to the earth. Now, that doesn't mean civilization in and of itself is bad. God loves building cities when he's the builder of it. It's just when humans build cities, they do stupid things. So, concept of a big city, nothing wrong with the concept, as long as God's building it. So God is basically saying, I'm going to obliterate people on the earth, I'm going to let 8 people live, and I'm going to send you back to farming, no matter how advanced your civilization was. It's totally irrelevant. We don't know how advanced it was. It makes for great science fiction books or fake history books. We just don't know that. But the people on the earth during Noah's time simply didn't believe him. And he preached for 120 years. They just didn't believe him. Okay, so they believe him. So they didn't understand. God is going to judge the earth. And in Noah's time, he's going to do it with water. So they lived a normal, regular lifetime. It got worse and worse and worse moral. You read Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. It was one of the most horrendous times that we know of, written in history in the planet. And God finally said, fine, I've had enough. But up to the point when Noah got in the ark and closed the door, nobody understood what was going on because they hadn't listened to God. So in verse 39, they didn't comprehend what was going to happen because they didn't believe Noah. And then it says, when the flood came, took them all away. That's judgment. He killed them all. He drowned them all. Took them all away. He didn't take Noah and his wife and 3 sons and 3 daughters away. He saved them in an ark. So he didn't take them away. So note this. He removed all those people from the earth, but he left Noah and his family on the earth. He saved them from the wickedness and the sin of the earth, but he didn't remove them from the planet and take them to heaven. He left them on the earth. Then he says in verse 39, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. So what little we can glean from this concept of Noah's lifetime is the vast majority of humanity will not understand or listen to God before Jesus comes back. There'll be the tribulation, he'll appear, and at that point, looking back, the vast majority of humanity will not be tuned into him, loving him, or following him. And that's why when he shows up, they're going to mourn, they're going to recognize it. But it's different here. This is a time when they're going to be able to mourn before being judged. In Noah's time, they didn't really have time to mourn, they drowned. But the setting was the same. The world wasn't listening, and therefore they weren't ready. Now let's talk about believers. Was Noah and his wife and kids ready? Yep. Why? Because they believed God. And because they believed God, they were expecting him to come. I'm not sure the text told Noah exactly when the rain was going to start. It's probably God just said, build the ark, and when I see you've got it to the point where I want it, I'm going to then tell you, get in the ark. It's coming today. But I'm not going to tell you necessarily the date down the road. Here's how much time you have. Could you speed up the production of your boat? No. He just said, build a boat. Noah built the boat, and then God came in and said, okay, now I'm going to tell you when. Well, that's very similar to Jesus coming back, because God's not telling us when. He's just saying, here it comes. You ready? Build your boat. Be ready. Get yourself ready. Be expecting him. And then you won't be caught off guard when he shows up. Right? So when things start to happen and go south, you realize, aha, well, I'm ready. Whether we're here on the earth as believers at that time or not, but for the unsaved world, it'll be just like Noah. They weren't ready. They didn't care until, boom, they either drowned or the next time there'll be fire. Then he says in verse 40, and this verse has mixed people up because I'll show you why in a second. There will be 2 in the field, 1 taken, 1 left. 2 women be grinding at the mill, 1 taken and 1 left. Now, nobody is definitively clear on what that actually means. Are the ones taken good or bad? Are the ones left good or bad? There was a movie a few years ago where they postulated that the angels were going to come back and they were going to take all the bad away and leave the good guys on the earth. And it is an interesting possibility that if it is true that the rapture will happen before the tribulation and all those millions of people disappear, the world's going to have to try and explain that somehow. And one possibility is, well, aliens came and got all of them. They were all bad guys. The ones that are left are good guys. The aliens left us here. Yeah, good luck with that. Time will prove they're wrong. But we don't really know who's here or not. But when we look at Noah, and it's going to be like in the days of Noah, when it was all over, when that flood was all over, who was left on the earth? Noah. So God didn't come in and judge the people by eliminating the earth. He eliminated the people and then left Noah on the earth. So it's probable in verse 40 and 41 that those who were taken in judgment. And those left, like Noah, are left to enjoy what's going to come afterwards. When it happens, we'll know for certain. Verse 42, be awake, be ready. I want you ready for the coming. Even if it's not in your lifetime, I want you ready for your coming. And I don't know what preacher once said, what do you want to be doing the minute Jesus shows up? That's a good idea. It keeps us from sinning as much. And he further supports that in verse 43. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would have not allowed his house to be broken into. It's interesting that he's comparing his coming to a thief coming in the night. When do we stay awake? When there's the biggest danger. And a thief breaking into a house is a big danger, and so the head of the house wants to know, so he'll stay awake, ready for it. The biggest danger to the world, I could say, is themselves, which is partially true. But the biggest danger is Jesus coming back, and they haven't repented of their sins. That's when they should be awake to keep it from happening. Well, they can't keep it from happening, of course. But the illustration is apropos. If the enemy is going to come, you need to be ready for him. And Jesus is the enemy of people who hate him. So verse 43 is pretty clear. But verse 44, he's talking to believers. For this reason, you also must be ready, you believers. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. We all fall into the trap of one more day, what's going to happen today, normal stuff, what's going to happen tomorrow. I've got my week plan, my month plan, my year plan, my whole degree, my whole lifetime plan, etc. We don't know when he's going to show up. We don't know. And if you think about, he's going to come next Thursday. Well, what would we change in the next 3 or 4 or 5 days before next Thursday shows up? Well, I know for a fact he's going to come next year. I don't, of course. But what would we change? What would he do in this last year? Here's the point. Live every day for him, loving him, obeying him, doing normal stuff we do in everyday life, just conscious of the fact he's going to come back and all this will end. And we're going to get to go to heaven with him forever. Just be ready for that. It's so calming and so soothing to think all this garbage is going to quit someday. and I'm actually going to get out of here. Well, I'm going to avoid trouble. I'm going to avoid persecution. I'm going to love my wife and my kids and maybe my dog, and I'll do my farming or do my job. But every morning I'm waking up wondering, today, Lord? Today? If not, okay, we'll tolerate another day, but I'm ready. Doesn't mean I think 24 hours I think of, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming. No. But it's above the consciousness level. He's coming back. And I want to be as ready as possible, not become a monk and go hide from humanity out in the woods. He wants us witnessing. He wants us talking to other people about him. But inside my own soul, I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay? And here he gives us a clear illustration of what he wants us to do and how he wants us to live as we're waiting. Not as we're not waiting, but as we're waiting. Verse 45, who then is the faithful and prudent slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give him their food at the proper time? Who is the faithful and prudent slave? Faithful, he's going to obey and do what needs to be done. Prudent, he's going to do it to the best of his ability. Verse 46, blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. I think Colossians says whatever we do, we should do for the Lord. If I'm going to do something for someone I love dearly, I'm going to try to do the very best I can. It may be pathetically poor. I may do a horrible job, but I'm going to try to do my very best. Not because somebody demands it, but because I want to for him. And when he shows up, I will hand him my pathetic things I've done, and he's going to say, I don't care about the quality. I care about you did your best. You love me to do it for me. So whatever you're doing for me while you're waiting for me, just do it for me and do it to the best you can. And you'll be fine. I will accept you and I will accept what you've done. Because verse 46, blessed is that slave, and we are his slaves in a positive sense, whom his master, Jesus, finds so doing when he comes. So it's not one of those things, okay, Lord, I finished this, come and get it. He might come and get it right in the middle of me doing it. Whatever it is I'm doing, there I am driving a tractor or teaching a class or taking my family on a vacation. Boom. There it is. He took me. That's awesome. Verse 47. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. We'll get rewards. No details at this point. We wouldn't understand them anyway. But if that evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time, and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him. Why didn't he expect him? Because he wasn't ready for him. He wasn't waiting for him. It's not that he got caught off guard because Jesus snuck up on him. He wasn't waiting for it. He got caught off guard because he wasn't ready himself. At that hour, which he doesn't know, he will cut him in pieces, assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is talking to the unsaved. A true believer will be wanting Jesus to come, doing the best we can to get through this life and then pull us out of this dog pile and take us into heaven. And we're ready for him. And then in chapter 25, which we're not going to cover, he talks about the 10 virgins. The whole point is, are you ready? Are you prepared? So he doesn't answer the question when he's coming back. He answers only the question of what we should be doing when he shows up. And that's expecting him. Expecting him and doing everything we can to honor and glorify him in our life, in our thoughts, in our relationships. And when he comes, everything will be okay. Now, if we do end up as believers going through the Great Tribulation, you only die once. So if you get killed right at the beginning, fine. No big deal. If you get tortured a little bit and then get killed, well, don't get so upset about that because people have been tortured for 2,000 years for their faith in Jesus, and that wasn't the Great Tribulation. So the Great Tribulation is no big deal for believers. If we do go through it, we'll die. We'll be persecuted, killed for our faith. But if we don't go through it, we won't worry about it. We won't be looking, I don't think we'll be looking down on it going, kill those people. No, probably not. Nor looking down and go, get saved quick, before. Once we're in heaven, we're changed into his image. And we'll see things the way he sees things. Okay, so in the days of Noah, there are a number of ideas about the days of Noah. There were monsters during his time, and did angels co-inhabitate with female women, etc. And maybe I'll write a little tiny book on it, put on an ebook or something. But the bottom line is, they weren't ready for him. In the days of Noah, they weren't ready. When he comes back the next time, they won't be ready. The believers, he's saying, guys, you can be ready. You don't need to know when I'm showing up. You can be ready no matter when it is. And that's what I want from you. Okay, I hope you're enjoying these videos. We're going to start Revelation chapter 4 in the next video. Unless, of course, I think of something in between that I think might be applicable. But we're not going to go through the whole book of Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, etc. Let's jump into Revelation chapter 4. Have a nice time. Hope you enjoyed this. I'm loving it. Bye.